The Old West was a hard place. The only thing in abundance was poverty and firearms. Combine alcohol and hopelessness with greed, envy, lust, and pride, and death is often the result. Crude cabins stood alone in the wilderness, cut off from the outside world. People knew to mind their own business, but isolated, they grew ignorant and superstitious. Some said the devil walked the earth, said lost souls haunted and possessed the living, pushing them past the edge of sanity. In this harsh and dangerous country, no one had it easy.
Here's a game I've kind of been meaning to cover for a while. It's Hard West, a game I first heard about a couple of months after it launched. It was originally a Kickstarter game, and I think it was a review somewhere that said that this is a Wild West game with XCOM-like combat, and I'm like, I'm in! This is totally my kind of game. I kept wondering why I hadn't heard about it, and I hardly ever saw anyone mention it. But I played it for a while on PC and was kind of busy with real life stuff, and now that it's out on the Nintendo Switch, which is the version we are seeing in this video, I was kind of reminded that I really wanted to talk about this game. Because I love that the new XCOM combat is something that is really setting the stage for these types of Western tactical RPGs to make a comeback. Because it's just so intuitive. I mean, like XCOM, you mostly want to try and stay in cover, and if it's a cover with a full shield, you're in full cover, and if it's a half shield, you're in half cover. When you choose to attack, it will automatically target the character which you are most likely to be able to hit, but you can switch targets if you so choose, depending on what your character can see, of course. But there's a couple of big differences that really play into the strategy of this game. First of all, combat cover mitigates damage, which means if someone is shooting at you with a standard 6 shooter that normally does 4 damage, well, if you're in full cover you might only receive 1 damage or 2 damage if you're in half cover. That's just an example. Some of the weapons are more powerful, some are less powerful, but yeah, that basically means that flanking maneuvers is a huge part of the game. Now a smart player would obviously just rush just past the enemy and shoot them in the back. And how do you combat something like that in a game like this? Well, in games like XCOM and others like it, you usually have an Overwatch mechanic, where players and enemy characters have a chance to take a pot shot at anyone who tries to move. But here it's a bit different. If you put your movement marker over an enemy character, you will see a red circle around them, and if you run into or through that circle, they'll take a shot at you that 99% of the time will kill your character. Unfortunately, your characters don't have the same circle, so enemies that are a bit too close can usually put themselves in a good position to try and take you down. But if someone does take a shot at you, or you take a shot at your enemy, there's another stat that plays into stuff. Apart from just having health, you also have something called luck. And this mostly plays into whether or not you will actually get hit or not. So if a group of enemies are dumping at you, your luck will pretty quickly run out. But if you do take a hit, you will sometimes get some luck back. So it's a little bit like karma, I guess. If something bad happened to you, well, then something good is bound to happen in the future. Maybe. But luck is also kind of your mana pool, if you will, for your special abilities. These are equipped in a menu as cards before combat, and this can be abilities like being able to shoot through walls, or even doing some Lucky Luke stuff where you ricochet your bullet off various metallic objects to hopefully shoot your enemy in the back, where you do the most damage. And just when you've gotten used to all these systems, this is when they start introducing the supernatural stuff.
Bleeding out on the floor, helpless to protect Florence, you felt your life ebbing away. You gave your last breath. But on that breath, you pledged to him. You gave your soul for a shot at revenge. Trapped betwixt life and death, you now belonged to neither realm. The coffin nails didn't hold fast. You were supposed to be dead, so no one took notice right away. You considered raising the alarm to bring in more enemies, just to satisfy your bloodlust.
The supernatural stuff isn't actually much of a game changer. It mostly uses the same idea of special abilities that you're already used to, but now it's stuff like magically being able to exchange health with another character, cannibalism, an ability where you can eat corpses to regain health, but also abilities that utilizes shadow. This is where light and shadow starts to come into play, like this ability that will cause you to regenerate health in each round as long as you're in the shadows. So now you have another tactical consideration to take into account when choosing a spot to hide behind, because you really want to get in on that shadow side. But the combat is actually only half the game. This is actually a pretty elaborate role-playing game that has multiple storylines. The main one playing out with you and your dad trying to gather funds to hit the Oregon Trail. So you move around this map trying to get a license to dig for gold and gather enough funds and talk to people and get into trouble with some Mexicans. You even get approached by who is heavily implied to be the devil himself, who is the one who turns you into this undead killing machine. And it's not very flashy to look at, it's just walls of text, as you can see here, but the story just have so much style, and what I really like about it is that it isn't as overt. Like, they don't nail stuff down and say, oh, now you're a vampire, but you're just sort of an undead character. There's all this sort of mystical stuff happening that spreads out into the other stories in the game, like this one where you're playing as a scientist trying to figure out why everyone seemed to be going mad. And it draws a little bit on H.P. Lovecraft inspiration, but not quite. In his campaign you are aided by mysterious Pinkerton agents, and while the combat remains the same, there's this whole system on the role-playing side about inventing new weapons and items to help you in combat, and trying to find the source of the madness before you go all too crazy.
Delir was nervous and thought about fleeing. Then 3 massive Pinkertons appeared. Each introduced himself in turn, but all 3 had the same name, Mr. Persons. They explained that they had been hired to protect him, but declined to say by whom.
You get to face off against cannibals, demon worshippers, and actual demons, which kind of leads into my one gripe with the game, which is that since they don't have any kind of melee combat system, because they, as I mentioned earlier, don't have an Overwatch system and just have those circles around them, it kind of puts a bit of a limit on the enemy variety. There's no sort of zombies or monsters trying to come up and claw you, and the demons you meet, they'll certainly look like demons, with horns and everything, but mostly it's just another character with a gun who has slightly more HP than the rest of them. Still, you can spice things up in the options menu before you start a campaign. You can turn off that whole circle retaliation thing, set it up so enemies can use the same kind of wild abilities that your characters use. You can even change the effect of cover, or have characters regenerate luck. There's just a ton of modifiers. It's a really open game in that regard. But yeah, as I said, the walls of text are something that might be intimidating to some people who don't like to read a lot, but it just oozes so much style. And the spoken lines that are here, delivered by Death himself, who kind of narrates your adventure, well, they're just expertly done. The Wild West theme with the supernatural, well, it all seems just like a perfect mix. The kind of stuff you look at and think, hey, is this adapted from a book or a comic book or something? But it seems to be a wholly original idea from Polish developer Creative Forge Games. Hard West is simply brilliant, and I really hope we'll see a sequel someday, one with a bigger budget and even bigger ambitions. As always, I want to thank you for watching, thank you for subscribing, an extra big thank you to my Patreons who are supporting me with as little as $1 a month, which you can as well if you follow the link below the video.